Music has always been able to respond to crises. Whether political, pandemic, or personal, music has the power to comfort or challenge, to find new meaning or attack the status quo. Contemporary music may seem inaccessible, academic, or even ugly at first, but so many powerful emotions, messages, atmospheres, affects, and ideas are hidden behind its rough facade. We are on a journey to find out how composers since the Second World War deal with a world in crisis, inviting today's musicians to react to the COVID era.
Composers sometimes feel the need to get away, to look elsewhere for solace and inspiration, to flee from their crises. Fleeing to another country, desperately seeking acceptance, but also fleeing to new musical universes, trying to find their own voice.
The music of the Canadian composer Claude Vivier can't be compared to anything else. There are some spectral characteristics, and there are influences from the Far East, but most of all, it's a personal language. One of darkness, sex, worship, fear, and longing.
I think everybody who has been to Indonesia, especially in the times when the big tourism was not yet developed, and you would encounter a culture like that, you're blown away. And you feel 100 years of tradition and love for culture, and everybody is involved. You know, there's almost no difference between audience and performers, because the music and the text, the dance, everything is part of the community.
It feels kind of innocent, but you already hear a little bit the troubled youth he had when he was younger.
Yeah, Vivier, of course, a composer who's had a very difficult life, very difficulty fitting in, first in Canada, later also in the music scene in Europe. Yeah. And it was Bali where he met the people there and the whole culture
there. He fell
there.
in love with the island.
Yeah, he really fell
in
love.
People and also and the music of Bali as well.
And I think this piece, Pulau Dewata, is one of the most happy pieces of Vivier. I think most of his pieces have something very, very dark, and as you already said, it's somewhere there, but it's not so obvious as in some of his other pieces.
most of his pieces feel dark, and so again, I think this has to do with the place that he was when he was inspired by this piece. I mean, when we think of Indonesia, we think of the sun, we think of the joy, the beautiful nature, the colors, you know, it's explosion of colors. And of course, we also know about his personal life, his struggle with his sexuality, finding a place in the cultural society, let's say, in Europe, which was then Europe is a totally different universe than Indonesia, of course. So there, I think you feel more darkness, but also looking for the metaphysical, you know, the life beyond the material life here on this earth, which of course is that's why music is there, because there are no words for that.
I really think that Claude Vivier is one of those composers that should be played more often.
Yeah, his music is so atmospheric and very unearthly in a way.
Yeah, the unearthliness, I really feel that. It feels like space music almost, and it helps a lot that in pieces like Bouchara, for instance, there is the whole language that he uses is... He invented it, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's not existing language, and it really transports you to a different world.
Officially, it's for piano ensemble or any combination of instruments. And we chose to make a version of percussion, oboe and trombone. But because we had the opportunity to do the overdubbing, to play multiple lines over each other, let's say.
Yeah. So I could do 8 trombone parts or something like that, or
4
oboes, exactly.
And we had so much fun with Wim to create our own version of Pulau Dewata.
Yeah, it really makes you feel like you're part of the compositional process. Like, of course, Vivier wrote the piece, but because he left so much open to the performers, it really, you feel included. And I think part of the happiness of Pulau Dewata really rubbed off on us during this process.
Yes.
Just like Vivier, Giacinto Scelsi too found solace in the Far East. Scelsi was an Italian composer who found himself in a very difficult position personally after the Second World War. He was taken into a sanatorium in the Swiss Alps, and in his room he had this piano, And he kept playing just one note over and over again. And people thought he went absolutely crazy. It was just this one note. He kept repeating it. But actually, he was discovering a whole new musical universe. This was very closely linked to Eastern culture and philosophy. He was very interested in Buddhism, and he traveled through India. And for him, this new compositional language based on the repetition of single notes was very closely related to that. And I find it absolutely fascinating that a piece that is mainly built up of repeated notes is not boring at all. And on the one hand, it's almost meditative, relaxing, but on the other hand, there's also a sort of threat in there, and you feel the excitement. And you think, what's going on? And you feel like we're going somewhere. And this fascinates me, how one piece can have both those things, the relaxing mantra, but that, on the other hand, also the threatening feeling. The sound contains an entire universe, with harmonies never heard otherwise. The sound fills the space around you. You can swim in it.
People are more familiar with Scelsi's music than they think. For example, in the Hollywood blockbuster Shutter Island, Scelsi's music is used to create a real dark and confusing atmosphere, as if we were inside the head of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Ultimately, once you penetrate the sound, you become part of it, swallowed little by little until there is no need for another sound. We've asked Nicholas Moroz, a young composer from the UK, to write a new piece especially for us. He wrote what is possibly the first ever duet for cor anglais and trombone.
So I wrote this piece one, which means mushroom in Dutch, for Sebastiaan and Vincent during the lockdown in 2020. I'm living in London, and it was a really weird time, difficult time, frustrating and uncertain, but it was really nice to have this almost like a kind of escape, I suppose, in this piece. It was a kind of a study in growing material, musical material, structure, sounds in this kind of organic way. And this is why I chose the title actually, because it kind of relates to that, but also, you know, for me it was a kind of an exotic word in Dutch, and I wanted to refer to that because that's where the commission came from.
The search for meaning in crisis has never ceased. When meaning is challenged in our lives, we look for answers elsewhere. In culture, nature, or even inside ourselves. Claude Vivier learned to live with his crisis, but ultimately it led to his tragic end. The night had fallen, and I was scared.
Come!
This is a quote from Vivier's last composition, Glaubst du an die Unsterblichkeit der Seele? Back from his travels through the Far East, Vivier wrote his most famous pieces, but none of them regained the joy and liveliness of Pulau Dewata. His music became darker and darker. In 1983, Vivier is stabbed to death by a male escort in his Paris apartment. On his desk lay the unfinished score of his last work. It ends with the following monologue.
I couldn't tear my eyes off the young man. It seemed as if he had been sitting across from me for all eternity. And it was then that he addressed me. He said, "Quite boring this metro, huh?" I didn't know how to respond and said, somewhat disoriented at having my gaze returned, "Yes, quite." Then, perfectly naturally, the young man came to sit down next to me and said, "My name is Harry." I answered him that my name was Claude. Then, without further introductions, he took out a knife from his dark black vest that he probably bought in Paris and stabbed me right in the heart.
Suis-moi.
Chante-moi une chanson d'amour.
Oui.